We're not gonna get millions, that's all I can say.
Yeah, not gonna get millions. Well, that's what that's what you're gonna do. You're gonna dig an oil well in the backyard. Faith Church tried that and it came up dry.
Yeah.
Let's begin. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to be here to hear your word. Help the word to inspire us and to move us further in your service. Amen. Well, last week we talked about a couple of things.
Before we get too far,
Yeah.
I'm probably the dumbest one in the class,
No.
but why are we here? Why are we going back to these Old Testaments and the names that absolutely mean nothing to anybody? In fact, why are they even in the Bible?
Well, they're in the Bible because at the time that these were written, the biblical writers wanted to be absolutely sure historically that everybody would know who was involved. They're there because that way they can say, well, I remember this person, this person, this person. These are the people that did this, these are the people that did that. In the early days of writing, first of all, paper was extremely scarce. So they made sure that they accounted for everything whenever they wrote anything. Best example of that is apparently the true story of the author that wrote Roots. Which one was he? Alex Haley, I think.
Alex Haley.
Yeah, because there was an Arthur Haley too that was an author.
Yeah.
Alex Haley, in order to do the research, had to go back to a village that he thought was where his family had come from. And in that village there is one elder whose responsibility is to memorize all the generations of names going all the way back to the beginning of time. And what happens is this guy you start this guy talking, and you have to sit there and listen to him. And it might be hours and hours and hours and maybe days. And if you tell him to stop and ask him a question, he has to start over. But it's all names and number of days, or how were they denoted days or years. This person begot that person, begot that person, so on and so on. And finally, he came across the name Kunta Kinte, at which point he knew he was in the right place. But it took like 3 days for that guy to recite all of that and get it all there.
The Israelites were very verbal because they
Yes.
didn't have a lot of writing, but also today you can go up to a Jewish guy and say, hi, and he can say, I'm from the line of David, or he can say, I'm from the line of the Levites. He knows that. It's been brought down through the generations, through the Bible and through their family, so that they know who they're from.
But who cares?
Well, they
care.
It's very important in their religion.
Yes, it's
You're
very.
from the line of Jesus. They're from the line of David. This one's from that line of the Levites. The Jewish people don't believe in Jesus. But they want to know who they're from. It's very important. You want to know who you're from, who your father and your mother was.
Not really.
They do too. And that goes on all through today.
The end of years is this. The other is like it was a 400-year no communication.
Well, this is Nehemiah was written. Let me get this correct. Let's see.
So basically they want to know where they're from, right? That's what their whole game plan
Let's
is.
see.
Genealogy
It was written in about 444 BC. So
What was it?
444 years before Christ. So that's kind of in the area where a lot of the books were written. You see, most of the Old Testament was actually written while the Jewish people were in exile or when they just came out of it. And this was one of those books, because obviously it's taking place when they just came out of it. So basically that's when it was. There was that 200 years before that, there really wasn't a whole lot of communication going on at all.
Well, I know that was for, whatever, then it was close to the time communication stopped.
Yes.
So,
This is when he's trying to restart it. That make any sense? You know, he recognizes what you just asked and said, I gotta get these people back online here. And so, there's also during the exile, a lot of the prophets, they were out there, but nobody heard them. But their books are around. Daniel is one, Ezekiel's another one. But remember, they were scattered all over the place, and as a result, nobody could hear them. So they just wrote their visions down for later
But
generations.
who actually wrote these then?
What's that?
Who actually wrote these?
Oh, Nehemiah actually wrote this. Or Ezra did, because remember, this happened, he's writing it as this happens.
Right, okay.
But Genesis was written when they were in exile. So it was written hundreds of years later based on oral,
Like people telling stories.
Yeah,
and
right,
passing it
exactly.
down kind of thing.
Genesis, Exodus, a lot of those were written that way. And, but Nehemiah was written when it was, you know, at the time it happened. And
During the time of the Exodus, they're going based on stories that are passed on. How do they know that those are actual stories? Certainly the true stories.
they accepted on faith.
That was it.
Yeah,
They had no other way.
Because there's no way to prove it.
Yeah, it's, let's put it this way, there's been a huge movement to disprove there ever was a Moses and there ever was a David. Because in their view, there is no historical reference to either one of them. The Egyptians, for example, were very, very creative when they put their history on walls and stuff. There's nothing on any wall that shows any Joseph or any people
The Jewish
leaving.
people didn't do that? They
Well-
didn't write on the walls like,
Well, these murals are, all, are still there today, and they're huge, and they, all the historical events are up there. This isn't one of them. Now they're saying, well, maybe it's because the Egyptians don't like to admit that they were defeated. Could be. But as far as David is concerned, archaeologists are looking, to prove one way or another that there really was a David. Because think about it this way, if there isn't, if they can prove that that's not true, then Israel's claim to the land disappears.
oh.
That's the
That's why-
motivation.
Oh, that's the reason.
Yeah, see, because remember, they claim a historical claim to the land. And if it turns out that there really never, that there never was any of these people, then, they lose their claim to the land. But it turns out it's like everything else. It turns out that when, once, it goes far enough and far enough and far enough, and enough people tell it, they put a lot of value into it. There's all kinds of historical techniques that scholars use to prove what's real and what's not real. One of them is called technical criticism. It's a very, very precise study of how events would have fit and so on and so forth. Don't forget, the first part of Matthew is nothing but this person begot that person, begot that person, begot that, and it ties Jesus all the way to David and all the way back to Abraham. And
So if you say that David didn't exist, then they're gonna say that Jesus didn't exist, right?
Well-
Is that what they're gonna try to do?
well, they can't do that because Josephus wrote that he was real.
Yeah, there was actual historical proof that Jesus
Okay.
was crucified.
Yeah, the Romans actually wrote that down. So
Okay, so they have proof for that. But I'm just saying that if they say that there's no David, then they can start causing all kinds of problems.
exactly.
I'm here to prove there is a David.
See, the point of the matter is, you ask why they have to know that, because that's how, they didn't have last names, okay? The technical word for it is Barr. So my name is Wayne Barr Francis. Francis is my father. So basically, everybody has a name like that, so it all connects.
And you have some like Robertson.
Well, that's
Yeah,
Scandinavian.
that could have been from, the father's name was Robert, and I'm the son of Robert, Robertson.
In Scandinavia, that's the way they did it. Also, there's a Robert's daughter. So there, if you were a girl, you were Robert's daughter. If you were a son, you were Robert's son. Try to trace your family history through all of that. It's a blast.
It's
all the,
interesting to look at people's names and see figure out, are they English, are they Irish, and what does this all mean?
or the Irish, the word O means you came from. So if you're O'Callahan, you're of the Callahan line. So anyway, that's the best I can tell you. That's how they identified each other, and he's trying to account for all of these people to prove to the rest of them that, hey, you know, I didn't do this all by myself. Here was all these individuals that helped me out. Now today we're going to finish the book and you're going to see why he wrote it. We're going to talk about why he wrote it. But first of all, last week, why did people cast lots?
Decide who was gonna stay in the city and who wasn't.
Right. So he's trying to get people to live in the city that he just helped to rebuild. Okay? Because some of these houses probably weren't totally livable yet. So he figured he'd take care of the wall first and then take care of the living space within it. Okay, so what did Nehemiah do to dedicate the wall?
A lot of fanfare, a lot of celebration.
Yeah, but how many places did he go?
All around the wall.
Yeah, he went all around the wall. He kept, you know, here, 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 here. So people got to see that, yeah, you know, we're on our way. Now, to add to Dave's questioning, who wants to read Nehemiah 13, 1-3?
One to three?
Mm-hmm.
All right. On that day, the book of Moses was read aloud in the hearing of the people, and there was found written that no Ammonite or Moabite should ever be admitted into the assembly of God, because they had not met the Israelites with food and water, but had hired Balaam to call a curse down on them. Oh God, however, turn the curse into a blessing. When the people heard this law, they excluded from Israel all who were of this foreign descent.
Okay. What's he trying to do here?
Make them into a community, make them into a family, whatever you call it.
See,
Sounds like ethnic, today's ethnic thing.
That's what it sounds
well,
like.
exactly. That's what I wanted you to talk about. It sounds like that, doesn't it? Every once in a while, this is a good thing. There were twice in the 1800s where this was done. One was the reunification of Italy, and the other was the reunification of Germany. The countries we know as Italy and Germany have not been around that long. I mean, Germany wasn't reunified till the 1860s. Before that, it was known as the Holy Roman Empire. Anybody know what they used to say about the Holy Roman Empire? It wasn't holy, it wasn't Roman, and it certainly wasn't an empire. So a guy by the name of Bismarck got together and reunited everybody and created what we today would call Germany. In Italy, it was a guy by the name of Garibaldi. And he put together the country we know today as Italy. And as part of that, they had to have a language and they had to have, customs and all that sort of thing. But unfortunately, sometimes it goes off in the wrong direction. We all know about Adolf Hitler. Isn't that what Hitler was trying to do? More importantly,
Absolutely. That's exactly what he's trying to do too.
what about the people in Turkey? Who did they go after after they lost a couple of battles in World War I? Almost wiped them out. The Armenians. So so anybody who was a Christian Armenian was in big trouble. They had to blame somebody, so they blamed them.
I think the flood needs to come back. Wipe everybody out and start all over.
But they're not saying here that they're gonna kill the Moabites.
No, they just said don't.
They don't want them.
They don't want them to live there.
Yeah, now, you notice he used the word Balaam? Balaam lived in Aram, the town of Pethor on the Euphrates River, a curious mixture of good and evil. Balaam wavered when he was asked by Balak to curse the Israelites, but he finally agreed to go when the Lord specifically instructed him to go to Balak. The exact meaning of the account of Balaam's stubborn donkey is not clear. Apparently a donkey spoke to him. And so Balaam was told to go put a curse on him. So now Nehemiah is saying, hey, this guy put a curse on him, he's one of them, therefore we don't want them. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. That's the first thing he was trying to do. And when you can look at it at the time, that was what was very commonly done. People took over and resettled, and if you didn't fit, you were out. Look at what happened, just 2 days ago. Syria was taken over by a rival faction, and what happened? A certain group of Muslims ended up in Lebanon within 24 hours. So this happens a lot. Not saying it's good, but it happens a lot.
So the Ammonite and Moabite, they wanted to get into Israel?
Well, actually what happened was when all the people of Israel were taken away, they just kind of squatted. And what he's saying is, no. Now that we're back, this is our property, we live here, get rid of the rest of these characters. And
Because they didn't give them water and food.
right. So he came up with his reasons, but Moab was actually south of west of Judah, and the Amorites lived kind of up in the far south. So basically you had all of these people that were just kind of walked in and took over. The same thing happened in the northern kingdom. The difference was the people of the northern kingdom never returned. So when we get into the story of Jesus and his ministry, he keeps talking about Samaria. Samaria is the northern kingdom where nobody ever returned. It was resettled. The Jews never got along with them. The fact that Jesus ever went through it would be considered a sin among those people. And that's where he meets the woman at the well and so on. Everybody else, including Mary, would go around it and then come back, because they were not allowed by law to associate with those folks. So that's basically what's going on here. The first thing he's saying is, if you want to call it Judah for the Judeans. All right, now he's got another problem. And would somebody like to read Nehemiah 13, 4-14?
Sure, I can read it. Before this, Elias, the priest, had been put in charge of the storerooms of the house of our God. He was closely associated with Tobiah, and he had provided him with a large room formerly used to store the grain offerings and incense and temple articles, and also the tithes of grain, new wine, and olive oil prescribed for the Levites, musicians, and gatekeepers, as well as contributions for the priests. But while all this was going on, I was not in Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, king of Babylon, I had returned to the king. Some time later, I asked his permission and came back to Jerusalem. Here I learned about the evil thing Eliakim had done in providing Tobiah a room in the courts of the house of God. I was greatly displeased and threw all Tobiah's household goods out of the room. I gave orders to purify the equipment of the house of God with the grain offerings and the incense. I also learned that the portions assigned to the Levites had not been given to them, and that all Levites and musicians responsible for the service had gone back to their own fields. So I rebuked the officials and asked them, "Why is the house of God neglected?" Then I called them together and stationed them at their posts. All Judah brought the tithes of grain, new wine, and olive oil into the storerooms. I put Shelemiah the priest, Zadok the scribe, and a Levite named Pedaiah in charge of the storerooms, and made Hanan son of Zechariah, the son of Mattaniah, their assistant, because they were considered trustworthy. They were made responsible for distributing the supplies to the fellow Levites. Remember me for this, my God, and do not blot out what I have so faithfully done for the house of my God and his services.
Well, well, well. When the cat's away, the mice will play, apparently.
So let the guy live in a holy spot, maybe.
Yeah, well, I don't know how many possessions this guy had, but it sounds like since he was in there, they didn't fulfill their obligations. Remember, we read that earlier, that he specifically left instructions that all of this was to be done. And so he comes back and finds out it didn't happen. So obviously he takes personal action and makes it known that he took personal action. But what do you think about verse 14?
He's just talking to God, saying that he did the right stuff.
Yeah, he says, all this happened while I was gone. Remember, I did all the good stuff. Keep that on my record. He thinks, as a lot of people do, that there's a bunch of cosmic accounts up there with Rolodexes and, and your name is on a card. Every time you screw up, they take your card out of the Rolodex and they note it, and then in the end, they're going to count all the good marks and all the bad marks. So he wants to make sure he gets a good mark for taking care of all of this. Now, why was all this necessary, Dave? Because the law of Moses said you have to do this. Well, the law of Moses had to come from somewhere, okay? That's the part that the Jewish people, are stubbornly hanging on to. They have to, because it's the whole bedrock of their religion, is the law of Moses. And it had to start somewhere, and by this time, it had become quite lengthy. So we started out by saying they read the book of the law of Moses to the people. Well, that's the only way they could communicate it, because they had no paper. And besides, most of those people probably couldn't read anyway. So it was all done verbally. So now he takes an action and says, I have fulfilled the law of Moses, which says, blah, 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 blah. And you just heard that from Ezra not too long ago. So pay attention from now on. We're going to follow the rules. Okay, so you get the idea that he was not a happy camper when he got back. Now then he's got another problem. This one's a big one. I need somebody to read Nehemiah 13 to 20, or 15 to 22. I said 13, but I meant 15.
In those days I saw men in Judah breading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in grain and loading on donkeys together with wine, grapes, figs, and all other kinds of goods. And they were bringing all this into Jerusalem on the Sabbath. Therefore I warned them against selling food of the men for
Hi.
who lived in Jerusalem were bringing in fish and all kinds of merchandise, and selling them in Jerusalem on the Sabbath to the people of Judah. I rebuked the nobles of Judah and said to them, what is this wicked thing you are doing, desecrating the Sabbath day? Did your forefathers do the same thing, so that our God brought all this calamity upon us and upon the city? Now you are stirring up more wrath against Israel by desecrating the Sabbath. The evening shall be still on the day of Jerusalem for the Sabbath. I ordered the doors to be shut and not open until the Sabbath was over. I stationed some of my own men at the gates so that no load could be brought in on the Sabbath day. Once or twice the merchants and sellers of all kinds of goods spent the night outside Jerusalem. And I warned them and said, why do you spend the night by the wall? If you do this again, I will lay hands on you. From that time on, they no longer came on the Sabbath. Then they commanded the Levites to purify themselves and go inside the gates in order to keep the Sabbath day holy.
Yeah, just the next verse. Starting with you now.
Remember me for this day. Remember me for this also. Oh my God. And show mercy to me.
Uh-huh. What does he tell you that he thinks why they lost the battle and ended up in captivity? What's that? He said, this is one of the evil things
They weren't following the rules.
that God, the Sabbath is a very serious thing in the Jewish religion. It's a very serious thing with a Seventh-day Adventist. Their Sabbath is on a Saturday, and they are not allowed to do anything on a Saturday. The Cleveland baseball franchise had a first base coach by the name of Tommy McCraw, who was a Seventh-day Adventist. And every day there was a game on Saturday, somebody else had to coach first base. That's how serious this is.
Some of the Jehovah's are on Saturday.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, they do nothing. They are not allowed to do a thing.
They're not.
It's just like the Jewish people have done in the past, and even some Christians used to do before Sunday. They cook all the food up before the Sabbath day, that day before. They cook everything up and have it so that they can eat cold and so on.
So they don't have to do anything on Sunday.
Right,
Saturday,
yeah, so they're
Right.
not, we're technically working on Sunday. See,
Right.
the scribes eventually defined what working on the Sabbath was and what it wasn't. And it took up probably, as I understand it, 3 or 4 volumes this size. As far as the rules, how, you can only walk so many steps.
I don't think the
Yeah.
Orthodox up there, I don't think they're allowed to drive a car or anything.
Right.
The elevator can't be on either. No elevator.
Ones here, they can't even use a phone
No, they're
in an
Orthodox.
emergency.
Yeah, they're Orthodox.
that was my
They're real
point.
strict. They're real strict.
That was my point. There was a big debate if someone was bleeding, what you could do to take care of it, what was working, what was not working.
I don't know.
I mean, it's very serious to them, and it was very serious going back. And they're basically what Nehemiah is thinking is that I have to eliminate any possibility that God would think that we are screwing up anymore. So, this is one of the things that he did. Now, again, the scribes would take it from here, and by the time Jesus was born, the rules were very, very specific. And you had the Pharisees who went around making sure everybody enforced them. They didn't have Pharisees back then. But the point is, so what did Nehemiah do? Make sure the rules were followed.
Garden gates.
With who?
His own men.
You know, they started with his own men, and then he told somebody else to do it. Who'd he tell?
Very end, he
Said he was gonna lay hands on them?
The
Yeah.
Levites.
The Levites.
At the end, he said the Levites.
The Levites are the priests. So he says, now, since it's the law of God, your responsibility is going to be from now on that you have to make sure this doesn't happen. To give you some idea how this has changed in our lifetime, I used to be in a golf league years ago, and they always had a get-together with the spouses on Sundays at the end of the year. And they used to say, well, you bring this, and you bring that, and you bring that. And they would jokingly say to the rookie, and you bring the steaks. Well, then they would tell him, no, everybody's got to bring their own steak. Well, unfortunately, somebody had gone to the bathroom while that was said. So they showed up on a Sunday without a steak in North Olmsted. They couldn't find a store open to get a steak, so we went to the York Steakhouse and tried to buy one from them. Unfortunately, Ohio law says they cannot dispense a steak without cooking it. So he said, cook it for 30 seconds on each side, wrap it up and give it to me. And that's how he bought his steak. Today you can buy a steak doggone near any place. But back then it was a very serious thing. Jill Hudson was talking about growing up in Kentucky. And she said on Sunday morning the streets were deserted.
Yeah, but when I grew up, there was nothing open on Sunday. Nothing.
Right.
Nothing.
Yeah, she said they were deserted, and she said it was either people were following, respecting the Sabbath, or people were hiding to make sure that no one knew they weren't. So this is not uncommon for that day. This was a big deal. This was one of the 10 Commandments here we're talking about. So he's saying, let's not screw up anymore. Look at what happened to us last time. Let's not have this happen again. And then finally, the last group, I will read this one. Moreover, in those days I saw men of Judah who had married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. Half of their children spoke the language of Ashdod or the language of one of the other peoples and did not know how to speak the language of Judah. I rebuked them and called curses down on them. I beat some of the men and pulled out their hair. One guy. I made them take an oath in God's name and said, you are not to give your daughters in marriage to their sons, nor are you to take their daughters in marriage for your sons, for yourselves. Was it not because of marriages like these that Solomon, king of Israel, sinned? Among many nations there was no king like him. He was loved by his God, and God made him king over Israel. But even he was led to sin by foreign women.
Those women.
Must we bear now that you too are going this terrible wickedness and being unfaithful to our God by marrying foreign women? One of the sons of Jodiah, son of Elishahab, the high priest, was son-in-law to Sanballat and Horonite, and I drew him away from me. Remember them, O my God, because they defiled the priestly office and the covenant of the priesthood of the Levites. So I purified the priests and the Levites of everything foreign, and assigned them duties, each to his own task. I also made provision for contributions of wood at designated times, and for the first fruits. Remember me with favor, O my God.
In here it also says in this part of my Bible here that Ezra dissolved existing unions of people who were married to foreign people. He divorced them. You can't be married to those people.
Stop and think. When I was born, my father got excommunicated from the Catholic Church. Why was that? What's that?
Married someone who was Catholic.
not only did
No,
you
you have
have
to raise your children.
Catholic, and there was an agreement you had to
You
sign
have to sign it.
to make sure that it got done.
Mhm.
So this was even going on here into the 50s.
In the
Yeah.
1980s, our one sister-in-law was excommunicated from the Catholic Church because she had a daughter who was 80 or something. And the church said it would be best if she didn't divorce, she just got an annulment. And she said, no, technically, I need to get a divorce, that's best for my family. And they said, no, so they excommunicated.
See, the point I'm making,
That's the old days, they don't do it anymore.
That was the 80s,
They don't do it now.
you know,
70s, 80s.
they're like the rest of us, you know, looking for members. The point of the matter is that there has always been in human history this idea of, I am from a line of something. My mother was the first one to marry outside, you know, my father was the first one to marry a non-Italian. First one.
But they don't like that either.
So, you know, what I'm saying is that my mother had it rough because she was the first one that was not an Italian. We went to all the funerals and stuff in the Catholic Church. We were the only ones that didn't kneel. Here's 250 people in the room. We're the only ones sitting there, and everybody knew it. They did, you know, they tolerated it. My grandfather, till the day he died, did not want to go into the church I grew up in to be at the christening of my goddaughter. He was deathly afraid that God was going to strike him dead the minute he walked in the door. This is extremely important that we understand that a lot of sects are very different than we are. The Muslim sect is one of the most strange. You leave the Muslim sect and they might kill you.
They're pretty rough.
When a Muslim declares to be a Christian, they run like crazy to get out of town, and their own family will do it. What's that?
So if we do anything that they think defiles the family, I don't believe that's religion.
One of our pastors, Reverend Mark Atkinson, came from a church, the United Church of Christ of Istanbul, Turkey. And, you know, he said the church had said on his dossier had 3,000 members. 3,000 members. And they said, oh, wow, 3,000 members, that's pretty good. As it happens, that's practically every Christian that lives in Istanbul, Turkey was a member of that one church because it's the only one they had. And they had one young man by the name of Ali who converted to Christianity, and they had to hide him.
Yeah, because they're very violent.
Well, it works the other way too. We're not too happy when a Christian becomes a Muslim. You know, so keep that in mind, that a lot of these things that he's doing because that's what people did.
I think that in the Old Testament too, they talk sometimes about how the Jewish people have to be separate, but sometimes they need to go out and interact with other people, but they also need to be separate.
Right, exactly. And, but the point here though is that all that Nehemiah is doing, and he's revered in the Jewish religion, by the way, because he put all this stuff back together. He got the society to work together. They obviously couldn't stand up to some of the foreign powers that conquered them, but at the same time, they had enough identity to fight back, which they didn't have before. The Maccabees, for example, revolted and overthrew the Syrians and got their country back. Those are the books in what is known as the Apocrypha, which is not in our Bible, but is in the Catholic Bible. They're the books between the Old and the New Testament. And there are several books about the Maccabees that talk about how these guys got together and got their country back. But in AD 70, they revolted against the Romans. That's when Masada happened. Are you familiar with Masada? Masada is still there. Masada was Herod's summer palace, I guess. And it's on a mesa. And the only way you could get up to it was an elevator. And so what happened is the rebels, when the Romans were chasing them, went up there and fortified the place. And somehow, I don't know how, but somehow they got water up there, because they brought enough animals and whatnot to, they had gardens for food. But they were up there 3.5 years. The Romans, the only way they could get them out was to build this humongous ramp. And finally, when they got up there, what do you think they found? That's right. All of them committed suicide rather than, get taken by the Romans.
When you did the plain deal,
Yes.
yeah, did you see that article where the teacher was talking about teaching the Bible in school, and he was talking about Ishmael and Isaac? Meaning that both were children of Abraham, and
Right.
one was, I think, the father of the Israelites, the other was the father of all the people that the Israelites are fighting, right?
Yeah. See, that's in there. That's in the Bible. It talks about that. And
He's allowed to teach it in a school?
Well, he was teaching Moby Dick, but the point was
Ishmael
that Ishmael, that this started the rivalry between.
exactly. That's in the Bible. Talks about how that happened.